Hello, everybody. Welcome to 2020 World AIDS Day. I'm your moderator for this show today, and I'm Rob Watson. I'm the regular host of the podcast Rated LGBT Radio. Today, I am joined with esteemed guests and advocates who this is probably not their first World AIDS Day. I think I can go out on a limb and project that. What I'm going to do is go around our group and have everybody do a self-intro and what brought you guys to this panel today. Richard, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, Rob. My name is Richard Zaldivar. I'm the Executive Director and the founder of the Wallace Memorials Project, and I want to thank all the folks at the LA Blade for inviting me on this panel. It's about having a conversation, an intimate conversation with the viewers and all of us to commemorate World AIDS Day and to recommit our fight against AIDS.
Excellent. Thomas.
Can you say that one more time? The audio went in and out just a little bit when you were asking the question.
All I want to know is who are you and what brought you to this panel today?
Beautiful. Yeah, so I am Thomas Davis. I am an advocate. I've been an advocate for HIV for 8 years. 8 years now. Wow, that's also how long I've had HIV as well. So yeah, I am an artist. I am the person that will go in and say what needs to be said. Not always in the most respectful way, but you know, but yeah, I'm an artist, a speaker, I'm a dance teacher, a choreographer, just kind of jack of all trades. So I'm super happy to be here.
Welcome. John.
Well, I'm currently a West Hollywood City Council member, actually ending 20 years of service on the council. But like Thomas, I got my start in the 80s when I was a dancer on the bass speaker at the Boom Boom Room in Laguna Beach until HIV hit, and it completely changed my life. I was in law school. I got out of law school and took the bar and became a lawyer in 87 and became legal counsel for various chapters of ACT UP around Southern California and legal counsel for the needle exchange in Southern California and legal counsel for medicinal marijuana. So I've been doing HIV and AIDS policy work now since almost the beginning of the epidemic to current day. So yes, not my first World AIDS Day. And I've been a person living with HIV for many decades now.
Welcome. And Karen.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Karen Oakham. I'm a journalist. I started AIDS has impacted me since 1984. I moved to Los Angeles from New York. I produced the 1984 Olympics for CBS News affiliates. And then after that gig was over, I got involved with the West Hollywood Cityhood movement. And there I met a lot of people who were coming down with this strange disease. And then meanwhile, I also wanted to become a playwright. So I joined Salome Jen's acting class to see what actors would do with my words. And AIDS hit the entertainment community. So, and then meanwhile, I'm also in a 12-step program. So a lot of people were coming into those meeting rooms to try to get clean and sober in order to, frankly, live longer. So I started out the beginning of the 80s as kind of a amateur caregiver. You know, I tried to help. I was freelancing. So I was trying to help all these friends of mine who were frankly dying of AIDS. Now, not everybody died, please note. And I still have some friends today who were sick back then who are still alive and thriving today, thanks to the meds. But I started reporting on the HIV/AIDS epidemic in late 1988, I think it was. It's still here. It's not over, and you know, there's a man to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. You broke up a little bit at the end there. And full disclosure, I was one of those people in the rooms with you in the early 80s. I started those rooms in 1982, and I think you and I even co-hosted a meeting at one point back in the day. So yeah, we were around there. And welcome Mary to the panel. Mary, we're just doing some brief introductions right now. Tell us who you are and what brought you to the panel today.
Oh, well, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Oh, great. Usually I'm I have to say I'm not technically savvy, but I'm confident enough, so I apologize for being a little late. My name is Mary. I've been diagnosed since '89. I've known Karen and John and Richard and I've heard a lot about you, Rob, for a long time. So it's always nice to see faces. I don't know quite what to say about myself. Is that I live in a very, 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 very red county, and it's been challenging. I still go to Los Angeles for my HIV care. I drive every month, or every couple months, with COVID's around, it's been different. But I'd like to take a second just to kind of tie COVID's and AIDS together. We hear a lot about the fast tracking of the vaccine and stuff, right? And I have to give credit to ACT UP for that. Mm-hmm. Because it was ACT UP who we put our bodies on the line to fight for the FDA to fast track our medications because we didn't have anything, So as they move through this plague, they have adopted a lot of strategies from all of us here today. And so I think that our work still continues to live on. So.
No, excellent point, and thank you for that. I'm going to segue with that because I actually had a question along those lines that I was going to work in later, but Mary, you kind of showed my hand early. So no, I think a couple of you guys on the panel, John, I think you were involved in ACT UP in some way back in the day. Mary, you were. Can you paint a picture for those who were not in the 80s of what was the world like for AIDS and how did ACT UP emerge and why was it absolutely necessary, which I agree. John, do you want to go ahead and jump in on that?
I will, although hats off to Mary because Mary was out there with her body on the streets. I was just the guy in the suit and tie getting people out of jail. That was my job. But let me just put this in proper context because I actually was talking to a young man today about some of this work and he wasn't following. And I said, "What year were you born?" And he said, 1993. And I was like, "Oh, God. Okay, I get it. You weren't around for all this." 1975, 6 years before AIDS started, homosexuality was illegal. It was against the law to be gay or lesbian in the state of California just 6 years before HIV started. So when HIV started, we were just coming through this process of come out, be open. And so many people lived lives of secrecy and shelter and dual identities and hiding who they were. And AIDS forced everybody out of the closet because you couldn't hide Kaposi's sarcoma. You couldn't hide wasting disease. You couldn't hide your body falling apart and constant diarrhea and all the other problems people were having. And you could no longer seek the shelter of the closet. It wasn't possible. And we were thinking and hoping that the government, Ronald Reagan's administration, was going to respond to this. And they did not. They ignored it. They mocked us. They saw us as degenerate and deviant and perversion, and the religious right was coming into power. And out of all that, all of these sort of lower middle classes, that was my experience, just common women, common men who otherwise wouldn't have gathered, were forced to radicalize ourselves to take matters into our own hand. I was kidding at the beginning of the show. I was just a drunk dancing on the bass speaker at the Boom Boom Room. That was my entire gay identity. I had no idea I was going to be involved in politics or law or any of this. But losing one of my best friends, Scott Fleener, in 1985, compelled me, like it compelled so many others, to do something. And suddenly, lying on the street, getting my body chalked, screaming and shouting, protesting, was all within the realm of what's possible. Because I was angry. I was angry at the loss. And so I think HIV and AIDS, I always say this to young people, there'd be no wedding cakes for gay and lesbian couples without the sacrifices made by people with AIDS and our activists and allies during the 80s. It was the 80s that set the stage for the next 25 years of activism. And we all need to be grateful forever to those that we lost along the way to get where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in many ways, if you had mentioned gay marriage to us in 83, 84, we would have gone, really? That's what you're thinking about? You know, it's it was sort of beyond. Mary, I want to go back to you though on ACT UP, and the thing John just mentioned or made allusion to was we recently had combined outrage over a president who did not mention a pandemic for a matter of months. What were your feelings back in the day about a president who didn't mention AIDS for years? And how did that feed into your on the street expression with ACT UP?
Well, I guess you have to get to a certain point where you're losing friends and family. I mean, friends weekly, sometimes every other day, we can all speak to that. And you have to get to a point where any means necessary. I mean, being nice and sitting at the table was not saving one damn life. So, a bunch of angry people, they didn't quite know how to deal with that. Like, for example, is that we did a demo for prisoners with AIDS to be released on compassionate. And we had the demonstration at the prison, but that was the wrong location. We needed to be in their offices. And the minute we moved those demos to Sacramento and took over those offices, compassionate youth started coming down the line. So it's the same with drug interactions. I mean, Trump and Reagan have a lot in common. I mean, it's been reported on in movies and all that crap, but, he's taking our money. He's taking AIDS money every single day from us, and our clinics are suffering from it. And I can't tell a young person or an elderly person who's just been newly diagnosed where there's a service center. I can tell them whether it's a clinic and you can get lots and lots of meds, but I can't tell them about case management. I can't tell them about any supportive services. And now we have that, millions and millions of people. So I say to the people who are fighting COVID, any means necessary.
Absolutely.
Take it,
Richard. I want to go to you. What is, in the light of a world that is all COVID right now? What is the position for a World AIDS Day? What does this day mean in this environment? You're muted, Richard. Can't hear you.
Thanks, Rob. I answered that question earlier today, and it's an important question because in this last year of the last 3-4 crazy years, we have been living in a situation where has been very hostile, and especially the last 9 months under the pandemic, a lot of our people are afraid. When we're talking about people of color, we're talking about Latinos. They're not just afraid about HIV, AIDS, and COVID-19. They're afraid of being harassed and picked up by ICE. Our transgender community is afraid of walking down the metro platform to get a train because they'll be beaten up or called names. So there are a lot of things that our community is dealing with. But as I said earlier this morning in another interview, is that today is a special day. It is World AIDS Day. We get to kind of zone out from all of the other challenges that we're dealing with, including COVID-19, and to make this day a very safe and holy day. This is a day that we get to commemorate all the people that we lost, but also renew our commitment to ending the epidemic.
Perfect. Thomas, I kind of saved you for last because of your youth. You know, and I don't mean that in a condescending way, but I wanted to come to you after we talked a little bit about the origins and in the day and the anger and the fight that preceded you probably even thinking of this disease even existing. What is AIDS like today in your perspective, the challenges, and how does that legacy impact you?
I mean, I feel like as a young person, well, first off, I just want to say I'm really grateful and thankful to be here with all of y'all. I'm honored. I feel like a lot of the challenges, I mean, it seems to be around the same thing, like people not being educated, not seeking education and knowledge, not being able to access treatment, kind of like, so I don't know, in some ways when I hear what people, you know, talk about what it was like in like the 90s, and I was born in 92, and the 80s, you know, I do get a little frustrated because sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, we're dealing with the same stuff y'all were dealing with. But I will say, I mean, just hearing, I don't know if I'm deviating from the question, but just hearing everything that you all said, I mean, I am a millennial that is a live broadcaster. You know, I've gotten into the live broadcasting thing. And today, actually, for World AIDS Day, on one of the platforms I'm on, we had a whole thing called a live house, which is completely dedicated to World AIDS Day, where it's like we have 32 people in 30-minute slots for the whole day, where they talk about, you know, HIV awareness. We have performers, we have poets. I helped organize it. And I think like just why, like it's still, that's why I'm like keep looking at my phone over here, because it's something that's still going on. So for me, I don't know. I mean, I'm hopeful and I'm encouraged. I am kind of seeing how, you know, all the other people on this social media app and other ones kind of are talking about it right now. And I mean, it is giving me a lot of hope. I mean, you know, what you all just said, you know, about with what Mary said about, you know, ACT UP and how that's a big thing that we owe a lot of, like this vaccine being pushed through for that. I mean, that was something that I was literally like just talking about on a live and having people like learn about it. And actually, you know, there were people in the comments that knew what I was talking about. So I feel like, you know, the work that a lot of y'all did really is paying off. It's just not showing up the way that I think we all, you know, thought it would. But I don't know. I mean, I feel like people have definitely, you know, seen the importance with the day. I think people talk about it. I think it's kind of now figuring out how to work through the information that's a little oversaturated and kind of creating a more nuanced conversations around HIV and prevention, while at the same time having to do catch up for the people that didn't come in for the gift card. You know, it's like, it's kind of like dealing with people that are very experienced and knowledgeable and kind of want to have to take a more nuanced look, and then people that are still kind of, you know, saying that you could get HIV from kissing. You know, like it's like a weird imbalance there.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Karen, I want to go to you, and I look to you with respect as a writer and a chronicler, as well as obviously having lived and been an active participant through the fight through the years. But I want to ask you something specific about Los Angeles, because Los Angeles, a lot of times the narrative about the AIDS crisis, particularly back in the day, and because so much of the vocal spotlight is, you know, from Stonewall to Larry Kramer to the Normal Heart, and a lot of the stories out of New York and the gay men's crisis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The experience of LA is sort of almost footnoted. You know, it's not in TV shows, it's not in all these things. What would LA's AIDS story sound like? Who are the major players? who would be part of that drama?
Well, the folks on this panel, for one, but let me just stop for a second and have folks realize that next June will be the 40th anniversary of Dr. Gottlieb having published that, and with Dr. Joel Weissman, that first treatise about this mysterious disease that was impacting, I think it was 5 gay men in Los Angeles. So it started, the recognition started here. And as a matter of fact, I interviewed a guy who was the head of the STD clinic at what was then called the Los Angeles Gay Community Services Center. And he noted that people were starting to show up with these odd red spotches on their face, or come in with these severe colds that turned into flu, and 3 days later they were dead. HIV showed up in Los Angeles in 1979. It's just nobody knew what it was called. So it took Gottlieb and Joel Weissman, and he told me that he first started writing up and alerting people, the CDC, in like March or April of 1981. But that first publication in the, what is it called, the morbidity journal of the CDC, which was then picked up by the New York Times, that shocked and scared everybody. Including a lot of gay men who said, no, not us, not us. Oh, it's poppers. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. And, kind of like hydrochloroquine or whatever the hell it's called is today. But if you look at Los Angeles, I think that the first real awakenings started in 1985 when Rock Hudson exploded in the news, and all of a sudden everybody knew somebody who had AIDS. Prior to that, APLA started in a closet at the Gay Community Services Center. The AIDS Walk started, I think, in 1984-85, and then that spread. A lot of the organizational work, a lot of the activism, a lot of caring started here. David Kessler became close with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who knows a lot about grief, who was the grief expert. And he started teaching us how to work with people who had HIV/AIDS, how to help people who were surviving their whole circle of friends dying. He helped me, but I still need help. I've got to tell you. I mean, I lost 100 plus friends. I stopped counting in 1990. I helped people die. I have PTSD because of that. Mm-hmm. This ain't going away. So one of the things, as Thomas was talking about, kind of a ray of hope, if you will, I'm now unemployed, so I'm writing a book, actually. And one of the sort of underlying themes of the book is how our experience, especially in 12-step programs, our experience with grief and helping each other, even when we didn't know what we were doing, might be a way of helping people who are survivors of COVID today, because they're all in their own silos. They don't have massive support groups. They don't have kind of the organizations that, as John was talking about and Mary was talking about, and Richard actually did, we created our own organizations, because it wasn't just benign neglect. It was screw you because you're gay. And right. AIDS is God's punishment. So we know something about this. We know something about the shame of and the stigma. So if there's a way that we can wind up helping people who are experiencing that now. Over 250,000 people have died in America from COVID. And people are on their deathbed saying, no, this can't be happening. COVID is a hoax. We understand that experience. And if there's a way we can share that, we'll see, but that may be hope in the future.
Right. John, I want to go to you on the cultural impact on the LGBT community and even the city impact from back in the day. I mean, I remember before West Hollywood was a city, and you obviously served that city well in the last few decades. But back in the day, before AIDS, there wasn't a gel of LGBTQ. There was gay men who didn't care for lesbians, who weren't crazy about gay men either. Bs were kind of this nomad in between that both groups resented. Ts were completely off the radar. We were all separate and uncaring about everybody else who just happened to be in our similar political spectrum. When AIDS hit, particularly the lesbian community stepped up, and I can't even tell you how deeply I feel that, to care for those of us who couldn't handle things then. What do you see as the growth of our own community out of this crisis on a positive, on a community level?
Our culture was forged in fire. We were forged in fire. What do I mean by that? Prior to AIDS, I didn't know any lesbians. I had no use for lesbians. I had no use for women, period. I had my circle of gay male friends, and they all looked the same. They all looked cute and poolside worthy and weekend warriors at the clubs and the baths. And that was my very small little world that I existed in terms of the gay community. AIDS and HIV suddenly forced me into rooms with lesbians where I met, and in fact, my closest friends today are in fact the lesbians that I did this walk with, that we did this work together with. It forced me to work with men that I couldn't see them just as sexual objects. Suddenly it was patients. Suddenly it was people with shorter life expectancies. Suddenly it was love revealing itself through a pandemic, that men were just not going to be something to use for sex. It was something broader than that, possibly. The idea of bisexuality, I just thought, they just couldn't make up their mind, or they were in the closet. I had a lot of opinions that I had to see were wrong. And Connie Norman was my first trans friend, the late Connie Norman. I loved her so much. I think everybody on this call knew Connie, except maybe Thomas because he's too young, but Connie completely changed my view about trans women and trans men in the trans community. And for all that, I am grateful. And here we are in the middle of COVID, and sometimes I just want to shake the public health officials, because as Mary started to say, we did all this, learn from our experience. We learned that abstinence only on sex was not going to work. Just say no to sharing needles was not going to work. We had to meet people where they were in order to develop safer sex practices around condoms and dental dams, in order to provide clean needles to junkies who were not going to stop shooting up heroin. We had to meet people where they were in terms of addressing the pandemic. And currently, so many public health officials are trying to impose restrictions and prohibitions upon where they want people to be. It's like, no, the other way around. Meet people where they are and get in there with harm reduction. We're not going to eliminate all risk. We're not going to eliminate all harm. We're not going to be able to get people to comply with the rules and the orders that you change week to week. You got to meet them where they are. Now, that sort of flexibility and that sort of creativity, it came out of the culture of HIV and AIDS that was primarily run by LGBT people and our straight allies. We created that culture. We created, as Mary said, parallel tracking for drug experimentation. Once you found a drug to not be toxic, You could experiment with efficacy at the same time and get to faster approval of drugs. We created all these systems that are now in place, but nobody's come to the LGBT community to say, well, what about harm reduction? What about, getting people to comply with safer practices around masking or social distancing? We actually know the answers if they'd asked the questions, and it's so sad to watch, but you can sort of see the public health officials starting to get there now, like, okay, none of this is working. None of it's working. Why are people not seeing this as deadly? Well, let us tell you about it. We have some experience with that around barebacking and masking up with condoms and how to get people there. It requires a whole cultural redefinition around things that they're already doing. And so that's what I find frustrating today. But I think with this new administration, I think there'll be more LGBT people suddenly brought into the process. Hopefully some people over the age of 60, because that's where all the knowledge is, over the age of 60, to share what we learned with the lives that we sacrificed in order to get this wisdom.
Great. And Mary, I want to take you back to kind of the debates of the day, because as we talked about before, the government responded not at all. And then when they did start responding, there was huge debates as to what the funding should go for, whether the funding should go to take care of people who were already infected. Should they go for a vaccine? Should they go for treatment? Eradicating the disease. What should all that go for? Can you give us some commentary and perspective on that?
Yeah, can I just back up just a little bit and tag on to what John was saying about
Sure.
How he didn't really know any women. And I want to talk about what lesbians brought to this epidemic from the beginning that's kind of been overlooked. Well, I wouldn't say it's been overlooked. It's just that I think LA has done an incredible amount of work around this plague, right? And we don't toot our horns, for lack of a better term. I think we've been very modest about our contributions to stopping this epidemic. Lesbians weren't just caregivers. We were organizers.
Yeah,
We mobilized. We taught pretty gay white men to fight for their lives. Like as if because nobody else is going to fight for you. And that's what the dykes brought in. That's what the lesbians brought in. And the lesbitarians brought in, We're mobilizers, we're caregivers, but we are down and dirty fighters. And we taught people how to butch up. And I have to tell you, I've never seen so many damn wimps with COVID. And you know who's going to survive through this plague? The queer community. Because you know what? Locking down ain't shit to us. We can lock down. I have my food. I have my health care. I have my wife, and I got plenty of dog food. I don't need to put myself at risk for not preparing, because that's all our lives have been is preparing. And we know how to do behavioral change. And regular society, they don't know how to change their behaviors. And we change behaviors. So as far as the funding goes, to be realistic, the only way we were going to get funding is if the funding was named after an innocent victim, Ryan White. So sometimes people had to be used. Ryan was good to go. He knew exactly what was happening. He knew we had to use him, right? And we made up categories. Case management. Do you think that there's always been case management around? No. The gay community made up case management because we had to show the federal government what we were going to use these funds for. We were going to use them for prevention. We were going to use them for case management. We were going to use them for hospice care because you remember we had no drugs. So our life expectancy was about 18 months.
Yeah.
So
no, perfect.
That's where our money started out. And we organized the CARE Coalition, this coalition, that coalition, the Ryan White Coalition. the LA County AIDS Commission. So that's what we did, and I think it carries to today. And I wish the people on the front lines of COVID, I wish them all the best, but I think we're going to come out of this better than the rest.
Yeah. Amen. I hope that's true, and I think that's true. Richard, I want to switch gears a bit and get your commentary. One of the things, and Mary kind of alluded to this, one of the disease parts of the disease is actually discrimination and prejudice and additional hatred. The stigma of living with AIDS. And going back to the day, I know my first political campaign in LA was to fight the LaRoche Initiative, which was an initiative that they put out there. And it's almost unthinkable that this kind of thing would be on a ballot, but it was to literally, they said quarantine, but we read it as round up people with HIV and lock them away. Can you talk about discrimination through the years and what that has been like?
Well, I think that discrimination still exists, and homophobia and transphobia still exists. I think if we're looking in the context of the Latino community, things have greatly changed. But nevertheless, we cannot forget that our community is very traditional, and it's okay to be traditional, And I think the work that we have done with the Wall Las Memorias project here in Los Angeles is work within those cultural norms to change attitudes and how people look at our LGBTQ community. And we've been very successful. But discrimination today, though, still exists as we have less work, less jobs available. People are going to look down upon other people simply because of who they are. When you have a presidency that calls the COVID-19 the China pandemic, the Chinese influenza, that's a problem to our API brothers and sisters. And so, when we talk about discrimination, this man in the White House that's currently there has given carte blanche to those who only believe that white people can only exist on this earth. That's a problem. And that creates the insecurities of the individuals of our target population. If I am a closeted gay or bisexual man or transgender woman, how safe am I to be who I am wherever I am at without fear of condemnation or a hit in the face? So I think when we look at today's society, we're also talking about not just changing behaviors within our own community, but changing the behaviors of the communities that we inherited. That's really important. And until we get to that place, we will not be able to end the epidemic the way we envision to.
All right. Thomas, I want to go to you about one thing with this epidemic and progress made by science around it through the years is the rules have kind of changed in the community on dealing with it, dealing with people with it, et cetera. Although the education necessarily hasn't caught up. But one of the other aspects is healthcare is not all readily available equally either. And now in the age of Black Lives Matter, where people are finally getting consciousness over that, what is the intersectionality between how it is affecting the people of color population, HIV, and stigma?
Mm-hmm. Ooh, man. So you're just talking about in terms of HIV or talking about COVID on top of it all too?
COVID too, because COVID actually follows a similar pattern with that. I mean, it is hitting people of color harder. I just gotta say overall, like, I think I got frustrated at the beginning of this because it was like seeing things and I was like, wait, this is stuff that was said about HIV in like the 80s, people being like, oh my gosh, the worst thing was that people wouldn't touch me or hug me. And it's like, we're seeing some people that came through that now, saying that about what people that said that now. And when they're talking about COVID.
And it's kind of like, wait a minute, didn't y'all learn this? Like, because some of the people, I'm like, you were around during this time. Don't you remember people saying this on the news? Like, don't you remember people talking about the same thing? And now you're gagging because it's happening to you. So that's just kind of an overall frustration. But I would say like the intersectionality definitely as a young person, as a gay man, somebody that's living with HIV, a Black man, it's exhausting. It's really exhausting. I mean, I wish I could come up with a more more words than that, but for real, I think that was what I felt the most. It wasn't so much being scared or afraid or like freaking out or going to rush to yeah. It's really, I just get exhausted. It's frustrating when you feel like you have to fight the same battle just in a different arena. But I mean, that's just talking about COVID, I guess. But overall, with when it comes to HIV, I think it's really difficult. I mean, a lot of the conversations I have been having with people in my community, over social media, connecting with people not just here in the U.S. but in other countries too, overseas, is that it's a thing that at this point, it kind of is a thing where people will be educated. They'll know about HIV. They'll know the difference between AIDS and stuff. But it becomes a thing where they're just like, well, I'm just not. I just don't want it. Like, it's kind of like a no facts, no femmes, no pause thing. Mm-hmm. And almost like I don't really know what to do with that, because you realize I think a lot of people, when you bring knowledge and education, and when you challenge something, people have been so committed to thinking about their life a certain way or thinking that something is true, that when you tell them that it's not and they see that it's not, they feel really foolish, I think. And I don't know, I think some people aren't ready to like take the rose-colored glasses off. I think some people just want to continue believing that a lot of the time. So yeah, I mean, so the intersectionality with that, it's I always tell people, like, I can't be in a space that's like a Black space and have it not have my experience as a gay man not impacted. Like, I can't be in a gay space and have my experience as a Black man not impacted. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think what I can say about the intersectionality, if there's one thing that people listening could get, is that I am not like a man before I'm Black. I am not Black before I'm a man. I am not gay before I'm a man. I'm not gay before I'm Black. It is all of these things, like, just kind of colliding at once. Yeah, I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you did. And what you said was fascinating in any case. So, but I did want to ask you guys, I want to switch it up a little bit, because we've talked about the legacy of AIDS itself, and then and now, and in perspective of a pandemic now. What I want to do, though, I kind of want to jump off something Richard said about the sacredness of the day, World AIDS Day itself. And it in itself has now a legacy. We have recognized this day for quite a while. And I'm giving you all this question up front so you each can think about this a little bit. But going back of your experiences of this day, can you think of a particular instance where you celebrated this day that had more personal impact on you than the others? That it hit home? And I'll share from my own, just so you guys can think a little bit. For me, two years stood out. 1 year when I was president of the board of directors of the Santa Cruz AIDS Project, I stood at a street corner in Santa Cruz. It was dark and cold, and I read the names of everyone who had died in Santa Cruz. And it's like that moment I will never forget. Another year, it was on social media, like Karen. In fact, this is probably some of the same people that Karen was talking about. I put up an individual page on each and every one of them and talked about every one of them, sort of my own virtual AIDS quilt, if you will. Paying honor and remembering, because I didn't want them to be forgotten. So I want to turn that over to you guys. What was an instance of World AIDS Day that, of the others, stood out for you? Karen?
Wow. Well, I hope you don't mind, but I want to give two. The first thing that came to mind was Tori Osborne held this news conference at what was then the LA Gay and Lesbian Center on the day Keith Haring died. And there was a poster of, that funny Happy Feet poster, of famous Keith Haring poster. I think it's his coming out poster. And John Chidester showed up. He's from Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. And it was the oddest feeling because there we were talking about death, but at the same time talking about this kind of joyous expression, with the Happy Feet and Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, freedom of expression, and being of service. So, talking about Mary and the lesbian organizers, it was kind of shifted a way of thinking that I could look at the joy of these people's lives and what they contributed, which I already knew through my 12-step program, but not out in the world, not as a reporter, where it was kind of my responsibility to report on the angst and, the policy and the pressures and politics. That's number one. And number two was Paul Manette was asked to give the World AIDS Day sermon, or remarks, I should say, at St. Thomas, the Apostle of Hollywood. And he was close to dying, and he was very skinny. And this is the guy who torn up the picture of the Pope at some national Creating Change conference that blew everybody's mind. A very famous author. He was Borrowed Time Institute. And his remarks were so deep and spiritual. And then he went and took communion. And this is a guy who had spent so much time giving a middle finger to religion, organized religion, because they had screwed us. They had left us, for all their charity, they had pushed us away and said we were worth dying. And he came to a kind of personal reconciliation. And that was just so extraordinary, as Richard was talking about, this kind of honoring of this day. And that impacted me greatly, because I thought if he could reconcile with his version of spirituality, what's left for me to reconcile with? So World AIDS Day has ironically, even as a reporter, as I report on all these events and all these people who've died, it's also like a mirror held up to me to see how I've grown and what I've done with my life and what I can yet do. So that's what it means to me.
No, thank you. Mary.
Sorry, I had to put it on mute. My dog was barking. Yeah, when Timer barks, the whole world barks. So, I get my dates mixed up, but, on an ACT UP, when they started, December 1st is, International World AIDS Day, we all had mixed emotions about it. So, some of us wanted to inconvenience the world for a day, and so one thing that stands out to me is that we burnt a lot of cardboard coffins in front of the federal building one year, and we shut down the freeway system in Los Angeles, and people were really inconvenienced, and the coffins were made out of cardboard, and of course, I brought a little extra, fire to the flame, and flame to the fire, and so we had, a big fire in front of the federal building on the street, with people, packed into the sidewalks and stuff. And, an aerial, when I got home and watched the news, it had shut the freeway system down all the way to Orange County. And, you know, I just kind of felt like finally, you know, people were, you know, they felt it, you know, they were pissed, you know.
Oh man, I bet.
You know, and the cops were like swinging the batons and saying, we're not arresting you, we're beating the shit out of you.
Nancy.
And they did, you know, they beat my wife, you know, they broke my friend's arm, Shay, you know, and they were swinging those batons, but didn't back off, you know. And so that's one thing that reminds me of, and they had to say on the traffic report, my sidekick here, and they had to report it, you know, on the news every 10 minutes, you know, the traffic reports on 1070 and other channels, like why the freeways were shut down is because there was an AIDS protest right there at that intersection. So I think that that was probably the most gratifying World AIDS Day for me.
That's awesome. Richard.
Well, that's kind of hard to beat.
Yeah, I say sorry. That was a really bad setup for you. I really apologize. How do you top that one?
You know, you all know that I spent a lot of my life organizing my community to build an AIDS monument, which we did in 2004. It's the only publicly funded monument in the country. And it was a very special night for the dedication. And it was one of the coldest nights in that year of 1993. Karen says, yes, I was. Yeah. And it was 38 degrees. And we had 1,500 people there for the ribbon cutting. And there were a few things I wanted. My consultant said, what do you want for this event? And I said, I want to have some stellar lights go into the sky, you know, something like very similar to New York, you know, off one of the World Trade Center at the time. And she says, well, that's not going to happen. And so I said, okay, well, you're asking me, I'm telling you. And so that night we come around to the ribbon cutting and the dedication of the monument. And there are two things that happened that were just magical. One is when we cut the ribbon, I still remember seeing all the family members running to the wall panel. A lot of Latina mothers going and just crying and rubbing their hands against the imprinted names of their son or their lover, right? And that was very powerful for me because it seemed like this community was released from the dungeon or released from the closet to say it's okay to loss. And then the second thing that happened that was so magical was because we had invited the Gay Men's Choir to come and sing for the first time on the east side of Los Angeles. And they sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And right when they were finishing that song, there were a number of shooting stars that seemed to come over the stage. I saw it. A lot of folks in the community saw it. And I realized that in our life, there's no such thing as coincidence. For me, that moment and that memory will always be one of divine providence.
Interesting.
That is beautiful. And boy, you stepped up, you know, in terms of having to follow an impactful story. So John, I'm gonna hand that next to you. Good luck.
Oh my gosh, you gotta follow the arsonist and the shooting stars.
Good luck. Yeah, God bless.
You know, this is so great that we're all doing this. To put into context that before I respond directly, World AIDS Day was created in 1987. ACT UP was created in 1987. The National March on Washington was in 1987. 1987 was a really critical year to set the stage for what was needed to happen after that with the election of the Clintons. I was on AZT. That was the first drug I was on. It was horrible. All my hair fell out, my nails fell out of my fingers and my toes. I lost 50 pounds. I was on death's door, and I was on a drug, you know? And only because of circumstance and timing did I get on protease inhibitor in 1994 in an experimental basis, that I was one of the lucky lemmings that didn't go off the cliff with my other 104 friends, right? It's only coincidence. And like so many, I've forever racked my brain about why me? Why did I stay? Why am I still here? And they left, and I miss them, and I want them here, and I love them. And what Richard just alluded to, you know, I was raised a good Catholic altar boy, and had my own beliefs about God and religion, and they were tortured. They were tortured, you know, because of Catholic school upbringing. And I had to go through my own spiritual struggle. But the thing that AIDS taught me, and this is what I'm getting to on my World AIDS Day, there is a curtain between the living and the dead that gets very thin. And I think that those of us who have walked in the presence of death, who have held the hand of somebody who passes from life into death, who have witnessed it hundreds of times, you know, that curtain is so thin. And we have received, I think, those shooting stars that Richard's identified, revelations and coincidences from the other side, from people telling us it's okay. We're still here. We're here. And there is going to be something after this lifetime. And so in some ways, going through the spirituality of death and dying and loss and epidemic has made me a believer in something beyond what my five senses can hold. And that I know when I did the World AIDS Day in the mid-90s, after it looked like I was going to be okay and I wasn't going to die and I'm going to actually be around, and reading those names by candlelight out in the middle of the cold, which is something that we did a lot in the 90s, I still have the feeling of the presence of ghosts and spirits. And I talk to a lot of my friends today. You know, every Christmas I put out the teddy bears of my friends who gave me their teddy bears when they passed at Midway Hospital and at Cedars. They gave me their teddy bears. I have 15 teddy bears. They line the underside of my Christmas tree every year as a reminder that I am still connected to these people, these women and men that died, and they are still connected to me. And at some point, my life will pass, and I will cross the curtain, and then I will figure out a way to send signals back to the other side, as others have done for me. And so how AIDS has made an atheistic, agnostic, God-hating homosexual into a believer in spirits and God and something beyond life, that's a miracle. That is a miracle right there.
And Thomas, your fresh perspective, having grown up with this.
I mean, as far as like acknowledging and you know, commemorating World AIDS Day and having it be something that I recognize. I mean, it really wasn't something I started doing until I was diagnosed, if I'm being honest. But honestly, this year I think has been the most, I don't know, the most powerful for me. I mean, yeah, okay. So this might sound really like the most millennial thing ever and very superficial. But for real, like this event, this live streaming event that I've been doing on this live streaming app is something like I've been on this live streaming app for since epidemic started. It's one of the ways that I'm actually making an income right now because I go live and I do discussion panels. I guess people find me entertaining, and you know, I get paid to go live. You know, whatever. I'm a bachelor. I'm single in LA. I guess it's fun to watch. But you know, I've been on this app for a while, and it's been like honestly, it's extremely messy. It's very superficial. Like 2 months ago, I had a whole like scandal thing where people like were accusing me of passing HIV to people without disclosing, which I'm like, y'all, like it was like, you know, there's a lot of negativity on this platform, but. Over the past few weeks, you know, as I was preparing for World AIDS Day and to do this big event, to have these 34 people like, you know, stream and talk about their experiences, today really showed me, I just think the power of the knowledge that I've been given. You know, when I go live and I talk about stuff, you know, I tell the stories that I hear, you know, I tell the stories that like Karen, the one that you when you read that piece at the AIDS memorial when they were doing like in West Hollywood in the library, John, you were there too. But that's something that sticks with me, and I tell people about it. The thing that Phil Wilson read, you know, that sticks with me. Everything you all said about ACT UP, you know, the things that I've watched, like all of those things have really, really stuck with me, and I pass it to my friends, and they pass it to their friends. And I think this year, what I really saw was like we started this live house, and one of my friends, he was the first one to open it up. Like, it basically it looks like this. Basically, someone's just like talking. So that's a woman that she's living with HIV, and she's telling her story right now. And literally, it was like seeing everything that I feel like I'd been given and that I tried to give to others actually turning into something beneficial. You know, it's very difficult to get this platform to do the things that you want, for them to give into the ideas and stuff that you want. Like, this is the first time they ever did something of this magnitude where you have like, it's going to be over 60,000 people that have seen this by the time it's done. And, you know, I got it to be about a cause, you know, not about something messy, not about like, you know, shade and people reading each other. And they added special gifts onto the app for people to be able to do it. You know, I went in there and my friend started it, and everybody, you know, that was, they have like little groups and families. They all came in and were supportive and were like, you know, saying happy World AIDS Day. People in the comments, you know, every single broadcast that we've had today, there are people that are saying, new people that come in that say, I had a father that, my father passed away from AIDS-related complications. I had a cousin. I had a friend, I had an uncle. And it's just like, I don't know, like, I just really feel like, I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And it's just really, I don't know, I just want you all to know that the work that you all have put in, the stories that you tell, like the traumas that you put yourself through again, I'm seeing it. Sorry. I'm seeing it actually turn into something good. And it's wild and it's crazy, and it's like I feel like I don't know, like it's I don't know, it's like all the little pieces that have been kind of falling just kind of feel like they're starting to fall in place, and like it's starting to actually turn into something that's useful and beneficial. And, you know, like I would, if you would have told me, you know, that there would be this many people, 34 random people that I met that would agree to be a part of something and to talk about a cause, they each have to talk about it by themselves for 30 minutes to 2,000 people. Like, and just seeing the people, like, there have been people that like were, I mean, I'll use this word, you know, that you know, I won't. But just all types of people from all different socioeconomic standpoints, Black, white, like Latino, just men, women, trans, like cis, like seeing all of it there. It really blew my mind, and it felt like, is this real? Like, this isn't real. And you know, people were telling me, they're like, you know, you did this, right? Like, and I was just like, I don't know. I feel like it's all from the knowledge and the things that I was given. And I know that the success that I'm having with it has to do with what was poured into me, and kind of finally figuring out ways to kind of use it in a way that works for me. Still not really sure how it worked out, but it did. And I don't know, it just kind of seems like, I do feel like this day is sacred and a little, you know, metaphysical, and I just kind of feel like it's showing up that way. Like, I don't know how I got ego to do something that was wholesome and beneficial and actually educational and teaching people about something literally of every single stream, but it happened. And I'm just thankful. Even when we came in and you all were talking about, like I said, when you were talking about ACT UP, and like I was talking about that when we were talking about how, you know, things were parallel between COVID and HIV, I was talking about that. So it's just really showing me that I'm in the right place.
Right. Well, thank you. Those actually were wonderful last words, because we are out of time. So I want to thank each and every one of you, not just for appearing today, but for your life's work, because that's really what you showed up here today with. And it's inspiring, it's wonderful, it's touching, it's moving. And this is World AIDS Day 2020. And here we are. So I'm going to turn this over to the production gods that be. Thank you guys for participating. Thank the Blade
Thank you.
for producing this. And most importantly, thank you people for watching and tuning in. And with that, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Have a great day.